A lot of moving parts this morning. I don't know about you, but I have like 10 left thumbs, and I'm right-handed, so trying to play music is just, and these young people, just amazing. So thank you guys again for sharing. There's still a few more things to be shared, so thank you for sharing this morning. It's Children's Sunday as far as leading us in the Christmas season today. And last week when I was in Texas, I had a chance to have one of those milestones for those of you who've raised kids and are further down the road than I am. You've crossed this milestone. Many of you have. Some of you are well short of this milestone, and just enjoy every moment till you get to these points, okay? But last week on Thursday, I was told in advance that I was supposed to have my daughter's boyfriend ask me for permission to ask my daughter to marry him. No. Now, there's a lot of dads out here, maybe all of you, who probably feel like I do. Nobody's good enough for my little baby, right? Nobody's good enough. Yeah, Chris just waved his hand back there, and we had a funny moment about that earlier, but I won't go into that. I digress. So here's the picture of the night it happened. I was only told he was going to ask permission. I didn't know anything about what was coming later in the evening. He asked her, and he only gave me 3 hours to prepare for it. Now, in hindsight, I should have known better because his parents were out. He had graduated from fire school. He wants to be a fireman. And we were out there for the next thing I'll talk about. So it made sense in hindsight. I usually pride myself on being prepared for things, and I wasn't prepared for this. But I was prepared for this. I looked at him and I said, Chad, it's not official until I see vows and rings exchanged. So I only kind of like you right now. With my son, it's a whole different deal. He graduated from lineman school the next day. That's his girlfriend. We love her to death. I don't know what she sees in my son, but I thank God for it. Anyone else feel that way about their son? I mean, it's like, wow, what a completely different thing. But lineman school, the guys who scale the poles, and it was crazy the whole time. The reason I share these this morning, thank you for allowing me to indulge myself just a little bit on sharing about my family, but it also kind of fits with I think the theme of the morning and really where we're at, regardless of what you believe, regardless of your faith commitment, how strong it is, or whether or not you feel it's important, but it's not the biggest deal in your life. Regardless of where you are on that journey, if you've got kids or grandkids, you are sitting there looking, and if you don't have kids yet, but you're thinking one day I might have kids, you are sitting there looking at them going, how do I help these kids grow up, be healthy, strong, and vibrant? Now, in our case, my wife and I, we wanted them, of course, to have faith, and as we've prayed for many years, a deep and abiding faith in the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. But if you're older than the age of 25, you can remember what it was like before cell phones took over the world, right? Now, if you can't remember that, all of us can still relate to this. We've all known screens in our lives. Television screens, computer screens. So the screen dynamics have changed. I can't imagine that people want to watch a movie in HD on their wrist, but apparently people want to do it. So things have changed. I mean, I still remember wanting to get away from the small black and white TV to the big color TV. Anybody else? All right, anyway, now we're going back down. Anyway, all right, I digress. Technology has changed things, hasn't it? It's also changed how we're helping our kids, and if you, like I said, if you're thinking about having kids someday, helping them in a new world that, quite frankly, you don't know how to relate to. I read something that's changed. I read something about what's changed in the world compared to, like I said, if you're older than the age of 25. I read something about the world that's changed. It said anybody under age 25 can't come to you to find out how to live in this new digital age. You don't have the answers. How many of you know you're digitally illiterate? See, not every hand went up, nor should every hand. Some people in this room are digitally literate. And thank God for you. I mean, like, if we need our phone fixed, we hand it to you, right? Now, to illustrate this, there's an ad about the effect of screens produced by Google on their Nexus tablet, okay? I want you to take a look at this commercial from a couple of years ago. It was marketed in the United Kingdom, but I think I also saw it here in the United States. Take a look at this ad and see what it says about the new world we're living in.
What is glossophobia?
Glossophobia, or speech anxiety, is the fear of public speaking.
Now, we are the masters of our fate. Sure I am that the task which has been set us is not above our strength, that its pangs and toils are not beyond our endurance.
In nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in, never give in, never, never, never.
You probably noticed a few things. I'm not going to do Q&A with a group like this, okay? Because quite frankly, I have no idea what you'd raise your hands and say. But here's a few things I noticed when I watched the commercial. Number one, the kid sleeps with the tablet. Number two, if mom wants to communicate with the kid, she has to grab the tablet, leave a reminder, because she knows he's going to see it tomorrow because he carries that thing everywhere he goes. But here's the third thing and the most important thing, and this doesn't apply to everyone equally, but it definitely applies to anybody growing up in our day. He accomplished everything that he was going to do. Granted, that painted the best picture possible, right? He used the content he found, and it was the positive use of the search engine Google, but he did it all by himself. Did you notice that? He did not talk to one other human being. And when it came to the most important questions of life, this is one of the things that's changed now that, like I said, most of you can barely understand. When you were growing up, you had to talk to another human being about those delicate questions if you wanted answers. You didn't have this privilege of access so that you could stay isolated between your ears. It is the greatest single challenge for everybody, like I said, regardless of your faith background or not, or where you're at, or what you value. It is the greatest single challenge is the ability people have to be isolated completely from each other. Now, like I said, if you live in this age, your life, even more than it used to be, is dominated by input from screens. Big screens, medium screens, little screens. It's dominated. Most of you work with screens. How many of you work and your daily work life puts you in front of a screen for a majority of the day? Raise your hands high. Okay? It's probably higher. Some of you just are tired or embarrassed, or you don't want to participate because some of you have a core value of never raising your hand when asked to. How many of you is that? Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, so the truth is, good and bad, most of us spend most of our time in front of screens. Do you think that gets higher the younger you get? All right. If you are a person who values forming a spiritual relationship with God in the lives of your children and grandchildren, then this next screen should be just eye-opening in terms of how easily it communicates. Take a look at this. The yellow represents spiritual inputs in a devoted person's life compared to all other inputs from screens. The ratio is about 4% to 96%. Now, like I said, the 96%, I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm not even saying it's mostly bad. The reality is this. When we search for information on the web, like you saw in the Nexus commercial, go ahead and put this quote up. When we search for information on the web, what we search for and what we're being fed is more mediated and controlled by others than we realize. How many of you believe that's true? And you don't know who it is. One of the things that's true, like on the commercial, how many of you recognize, like I usually suppress it, but like if you're using a search engine and you start to type in, it gives you suggestions. How many of you see the craziest suggestions pop up? Like, I wasn't even thinking that. Why would you think I was asking that? And the scary part is they've been tracking us, so then they're guessing at what you're going to look for next, which should scare all of you. No, this is not Conspiracy Theory Sunday, so I apologize. This is Reality Sunday, okay? But get this through your mind. Like I said, regardless of your background, this is true. Screens disciple. Now, when we use that word in a spiritual context, it means to form someone spiritually. Screens form people spiritually. I'll just use it in every context I can think of. Screens form people emotionally. Screens promise connectedness, but deliver the opposite. Did you know that? More and more research is going to suggest what Gene Twenge wrote in The Atlantic back in 2017. Screens promise more connectedness, but loneliness, depression, and anxiety among teens have risen right alongside widespread adoption of the smartphone. Now, is this a lecture to youth culture? Absolutely not. It's to all of us to realize we're the ones that screens are affecting. For example, some of you have mothers like mine. I'm not going to say how old she is, but she's older than me. And I'm 48, and I'm the youngest of three, so you can do the math. Okay? So she's in her 70s, just in case, you can't do math quickly. She's in her 70s. She looks at her phone as much as any teenager I've ever seen. So for any of us to sit back and go, it's younger or middle-aged or older, it's not. Screens have an effect, and they're addictive. Did you know that? And they promise something that can't be delivered. Maybe you've never thought about this during the Christmas story, but I mentioned it when I lit the candle. Think again about Luke 1:48. Mary says, "For he, God, has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. From now on, all generations will call me blessed." I want you to meditate on this verse before we leave it. He's been mindful. He's paid attention to me. Now, you need to be careful because some of you have a faith tradition that teaches what we call a little bit too much of veneration for Mary. Mary's a human being. She's a human being like you and I. I put her in the context of saying she's not superhuman. She's just like you and I. But there was a significant difference that's evidenced in that verse right there about how she lived. And make no mistake, some of us fall into the trap of thinking it's harder to live today than in previous generations. There's a little bit of truth to that, but what the Bible witness tells us is that nothing in terms of temptation or difficulty of living is new. The one thing that's changed that I do think is make it significant is the digital change, like the screens. I can be by myself. I don't have to, I could get content from halfway across the world and nobody else would know. But the other thing too is not just the screen, but the speed at which we get information. It just continues to get faster, and the capacity. That's definitely changed. But the temptations, they're the same. Don't make any mistake. Mary and everybody that lived in her day 2,000 years ago had the same temptation. What am I going to do about my finances? What am I going to do about keeping up with the next door neighbors? What am I going to do about keeping current with the gossip around the water well? What am I going to do about being significant? These things are common because they're all part of this hole in the heart that people are trying to fill. And Mary focused on something else that I think honestly is an open secret that everybody should pay attention to. It's an open secret about how we can live and how we can thrive even in this crazy age today. And that's something, by the way, it's countercultural, and the message has always been countercultural. It is always countercultural to say you should be devoting your mind and your heart to God. Because most people drift the other way. We drift towards being in charge of our own lives. Once again, I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands on this one, but you all know who you are. How many of you like taking your direction from somebody else? We don't. We want to be our own boss. And that's reality. Here's another way I rendered Luke 1:48 in my own words. What Mary's blown away by is that her quiet obedience is what God really pays attention to. She's quietly paying attention. She says, humble servant. She's just paying attention to wanting to be with and know God. That is so countercultural today. What people want is an experience. How many of you have heard of FOMO? Fear of missing out. Fear of missing out is one of the things driving anxiety in younger people. The studies are showing us, we're going to find out more and more as the years go by. Everybody suffers from it, but it's becoming harder to deal with. What happens if our focus changes from wondering what other people think to wondering what God thinks? One of the things about the digital age that's changed too, and I'm going to talk about this all through the coming year, is we're all busy. We don't even realize it. We've always managed our image, but now it's gotten even more pronounced. There's great critiques of this that I don't even need to bother with. I want to manage my image. I want to manage how you think about me. It's become even more important than before. But what is Mary's mind focused on? She's going countercultural to her day because people have always dealt with worrying about what other people think of them. Don't make any mistake about that. That's always been a problem. But where's Mary's focus? It's not on worrying about people. It's worrying's the wrong word. It's being focused on, I just want to please God. That is radically different than the message we're receiving. So what does Mary do? She models some ancient secrets. And by the way, I think actually most of you, if not all of you, know what I'm going to say next. But it's worth saying anyway. Number one, I've been saying it already. How does she foster what we're going to call spiritual resilience, growing faith in our kids? And in your case, like I said, if you don't share the faith conviction with me, how do you produce emotional thriving? It's the same answer, by the way. Number one, it's about seeking relationship with the one who made you. Seeking relationship with God first. You were created by a being who loves you. That is the secret to the universe. That's the secret ingredient in the secret sauce. There's no substitute for it. The answer's always been the same. And since the beginning of the human story, we've wanted to be our own answer. So the same temptation has always existed for everyone. Am I going to put God first or am I going to put me first? And Mary shows us what it looks like to put God first. Second thing, she goes about the business of fostering daily and weekly habits that spiritually inoculated her against the wider cultural attitudes of her day. Like we talked about with screens. How many of you know screens are sending you messages all the time? Some are positive, most of them are neutral, and probably all of you recognize some of these content things I'm getting I shouldn't be looking at. Anybody want to raise your hand on that one? Or reading, or whatever. So it's not all bad. I'm not saying that. But it's all coming at us. It's all going into our heart, whether we realize it or not. Your eyes are what? The portal to the soul. So what you allow to come in is what influences you. Screens disciple. Screens form you. Screens shape you. There's no way around it. And what did Mary do? She fostered ancient practices. She took time out because God said you should. She took time out every week to just focus on God once a week. Now, some of you are good at math. If I take one 24-hour period a week, one 24-hour period a week, one day a week, how much of percentage of the week is that? Some of you are like, I don't know, I'm gonna laugh on that. About 14.3%. Seems like a lot, but also it doesn't seem like that much, does it? Here's the good news. Some of you are like, does that mean I have to stay away from screens entirely? No, but you do need to take a break. And by the way, like I said, regardless of what you believe, every single one of you needs to take a break from the tyranny of a screen. How many of you worry about missing that message? Missing that text message? How many of you have friends who get mad at you if you don't reply right away? That's FOMO, man. Fear of missing out. One of my friends told me one of the things they've changed in their family this year is they have a charging station in the front hallway. Everybody has to come in, put the phone down on the charging station, and look at each other. It's crazy. It's crazy. Here's the third thing. What does she do? She focuses her life on service with God rather than doing stuff for God. This is really a message for those of you who think that if I just do the right things, maybe God will be happy with me. Or if you think the verse said, Mary did all the right things, therefore God was happy with her. No. You got to understand the heart behind it. Mary did what she did to be with God. That's how you experience God. She wasn't doing stuff for God. She was doing stuff to be with God. Now, that's not the main part of the message, but it can't be missed. All right. I want you to think about these things then, because I've already talked about them, but what can you do to foster spiritual resilience, emotional stability, to not be driven by FOMO, to have an inoculation against the tyranny of the urgent that the screen presents? I could go on all the way about the ways I've been addicted to screens through the day, because I grew up with video games. If I get hooked on a game, man, I am the worst. I'm so glad when I finish the game and then I walk away from it. My wife actually, after we got married, she actually took away, some kids aren't going to know what I'm talking about, but this little CD-ROM, she had to take it away and hide it. Do you know how frantically I searched for that thing? I look back on that and I'm embarrassed. But here's the reality. The same temptations, the same deals. I'm an addictive personality. I know myself. So I've got to inoculate myself. I've got to pay attention to what actually brings peace to my heart and thriving to my soul. Number one, develop intimacy with Jesus through spiritual practice. If you want to know more about what this is about, I'm only going to say this. We're going to talk about this every Sunday, starting on January 12th, leading up to Easter. We're going to talk about it every Sunday. If you want to get in a group that reflects on it during the week, we're going to talk about it. We're going to mostly focus on how do I develop a life of prayer. It's a scary topic to talk about because I'm not an expert. Does anybody know how many hours it takes doing something to become an expert? 10,000 hours. I'll just be honest with you, I have not spent 10,000 hours praying. I'm just going to be honest with you. So I'm no expert. We're on a journey together. We learn together. We grow together. Hopefully you see no spiritual pretense. If this is something that grabs a hold of you, something you're like, you know what, I want to learn more about that. I want to grow in that. January 12th. January 5th, we have another message, but don't worry, we're not going to miss that. January 12th. Number two, take your regular break from screens that are both daily and weekly, taking a regular Sabbath. I don't mean to shame everybody else, but let's see. And I'm hoping some of you who actually do this will raise your hands. Don't be afraid. How many of you take a daily break from your phone or from screens? How many of you take a daily break from screens on purpose? Not because your job forces you to. Listen to this. I told you my son graduated from lineman school. How many of you know that's a dangerous job? Like, they work with high voltage electricity up at a height. So this guy who gave the keynote address, best keynote address I've ever heard, and I've been to a lot of graduations. Here's the quote. If you're going to work in the lineman profession, you have to turn off all the distractions. That phone in your pocket, you turn that off. And you turn the line work on. Do your job on the line, get the lights on, and get home. Now, why did he have to say that? Because that whole generation of people in that class, while they're at work, climbing poles with thousands of volts of electricity, all have phones in their pocket. Do you think if you pay attention to the phone and take your focus off what you're doing while you're a lineman and pay attention to the phone that it could be life-altering? Guys, I'm convinced of this. When I heard this, I was thinking to myself, it is no less different. We're just not as scared because the stakes don't seem as high. But they are. What's going to be good for everyone's soul? And by the way, scientists are going to be backing me up on this. Psychologists, sociologists, everybody. You watch as the research goes on. If you're not taking a break from your screen is driving you. It's like the old thing about buying stuff. Does your stuff own you, or do you own your stuff? So do you take breaks from your phone and other screens? And is it on purpose? Number 3, this is a huge deal. Prioritize face-to-face interaction whenever practical. Especially fellowship. A fellowship is hanging out with other believers. But really, honestly, you should be face-to-face whenever practical. The business world discovered this. They got all excited when you could talk face-to-face on the phone many years ago. And then companies that emphasized talking face-to-face on the phone, Skype or whatever, they started to realize they were losing business. Guess what they started doing? They started flying again. Why? Because they realized you needed to look somebody directly in the eye if you want to make the deal. My wife was saying last night at dinner, she teaches first grade. She said, I have to write this down. There's a language deficit among the younger grades. They've been studying the younger grades. The language deficit is related to one single factor. You want to take a wild guess what it is? They're not getting face-to-face with people. You don't hear other people talk. What's good about this is not only does the Bible back me up, but science does. Isn't that cool? How many of you ever heard the Bible and science are not in agreement together? Not true. And not just on this issue. Last thing I'll say, then I'll close. Devote regular time to service. You want to experience God? Then join God when He's up to. I hear more regular reports about experiencing the closeness with God from people through service. There is not one singular thing that talks about that more. And so many people are missing out on service because you know why? It takes away from me time. And so I want to say this to you all. I would love for you to serve here at Christ Community, but serve somewhere. Give your time somewhere. It will improve your health. Science backs that up as well. By the way, just Google that one. All right, I close with this. This is the verse I came across in my quiet time. That's my own personal time with God, where I read the Bible and I pray. I try to do it every day. 1 Thessalonians 4, and this is the verses I read as I was preparing this message the morning of. Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, so that you will not be dependent on anybody. Make it your ambition to not make your own life the center of your attention, but make it your ambition to make God's living in you the center of your attention. And there will be something different about you. People will see that you have something inside of you, a peace, as the Bible says, that surpasses understanding, that you can't find anywhere else. The deepest joys in life come from being with God, having intimacy with God. My prayer for all of us as we head into this next year is that that would be something that would grow in each and every heart. But you have to make one single most important decision. Who are you going to put first? Put yourself first. Put God first. God, it's hard to live today. It's hard for me. So many freedoms, so many temptations, so many options, so many things I can do by myself. And I'm not the only one in the room that has that. It's hard to foster a relationship with you. And Lord, not only am I thinking about myself and all the people in the room, but I'm thinking especially of my kids and one day hopefully grandchildren. Lord, that they would learn this secret that Mary models, intimacy with you, as the antidote. God, may you be glorified and may you encourage each heart as we need to hear this message. That putting you first has always been the answer. And I pray your blessing on each person as we celebrate Christmas, Lord, in the coming days. Thank you for the gift of the one who allows us to put you first, Jesus Christ. In his beautiful name we pray. Amen.